When you go shopping at the supermarket, do you take a list of the things you don't want? No, you do not. Partly because it would be useless, and partly because the supermarket has, if you take it, I don't want apples or sausages or beans today, but the supermarket has 50,000 things. And so you get there and you still have a choice of 49,000 other things to have on your shopping list. You go with the shopping list of what you want. And that guides you much more effectively in the supermarket than the list of things you don't want. And the same is true in solution-focused practice and solution-focused therapy as it's used, and indeed in life, that the list of things you want is just so much more useful than the list of things you don't.
Welcome to the MINDTRX podcast with breakthrough ideas to live your best life possible and how to make it happen. I'm Paul Sheely, and today we will be talking with Mark McKergow. Mark McKergow is a speaker, facilitator, consultant, and director of the Centre for Solutions Focus at Work, based in Edinburgh, Scotland. His life's work has been about humanizing organizations in learning, changing, and leading. Mark is widely known for his ability to connect complex ideas with simplicity in practice. He is co-author of 6 books, including The Solutions Focus and host 6 New Roles of Engagement. Hello, Mark. Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast. It's so good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's really good to see you. It's been a while since we were able to connect face to face, thanks to all the goings on, but here we are together again, and it's fantastic.
Wonderful news for me, and I know for our listener as well. So tell me a little bit about how you got to the solutions focus from the work you had been doing previously.
Well, when we first met, Paul, I was really just starting in my interest in solutions focus and training as a brief therapist because I loved the whole way of that approach. Basically, it's about focusing on what you want and what's working. But the idea is that you move people on quickly. It's efficient. And in the world of psychotherapy, efficiency is a bit of a, it's an anti-word. People don't like to be efficient. They like to be caring. And they like to be, with you all the time. And that actually cosily means you'll never get rid of them. And so this idea of you want to do something that's effective so that people can carry on their own has always been really important to me, partly because I suffered under management consultants whose main goal seemed to be to sell more management consultancy rather than actually do anything useful. When I was working in the electricity industry, prior to becoming an independent consultant, that was very much how it looked to me, and I hated it. It's Dracula, it's blood-sucking, and they suck all the money out of the organization and achieve very little, and then tell you to hire them again at twice the rate, because obviously they need more time because they haven't been able to do anything yet.
Yes, well, you may remember that I had early in my career become a clinical hypnotherapist. And the idea of doing multiple sessions was ridiculous. Why would you? And I remember that people would come to me for quitting smoking, things like that. And what I said to them, we're going to do 3 sessions. The first one, we're going to get the change. The second one, we're going to generalize that change into other areas of your life so you know that this is something you can do for yourself. And the third session, I'm going to teach you how that happened. So I want you to own the magic here. And when I connected with the folks at Neuro-Linguistic Programming and was trained by Bandler and Grinder, also, they were very much about, let's start now and go to where you want to go. Let's not do a big retrospective of your broken history that got you to this problem state that you're in today. So again, another important resonance point around the idea of doing something briefly and elegantly. Now, you said efficient, but I think
elegance is really important too. So elegance is doing a lot with a little. It's doing something that's really profound, but doing it in a kind of subtle, shape-shifting way that uses a lot of what's going on already and doesn't change very much. But actually what it changes kind of pivots the whole situation. And that's really, really neat. And that's one of the reasons I went off neurolinguistic programming, because it seemed to be vastly complicated.
Really? Oh, well, yeah, I could see that. The first year that I was trained with my partner, Mark Kinnick, we spent 21 days and they taught us all these change patterns. And my partner and I looked at each other and said, why do we want to learn all these change patterns? We need to model how they came up with neurolinguistic programming. So we spent the entire month modeling the modelers. And the second
You're
year,
very smart, Paul. You can do that.
the second year we came back as master practitioners to be trained as master practitioners. There were only 70 of us in the world at that time. And they said, those of you who were here last year, kind of forget about all of it. It's really about modeling the modelers. My partner and I elbowed each other and said, duh, right? Because we really do want to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing when we're helping something make a significant change in their life, that it becomes generative, that they really own the way in which that happened and can use it then for all the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And that idea of making the client, if you like, kind of key in the story, and the person who does most of the work, and the practitioner is there, on the edge, giving a few pointers, and then can kind of amble away quietly because the client is so busy getting on with their lives again and relieved to be, freed of whatever difficulty or stress they had, and just back in again. And some of my colleagues talk about leaving no footprints in the client's life. I think that's a bold ambition, but it is very much the ethic of solution-focused work, is to be as quick as you can, leave no footprints, and leave the client thinking that they did all the hard work.
Yes.
That's what keeps it going, and that's what keeps it running. The NLP thing there about practitioners and master practitioners and grand master practitioners and wizard master practitioners, that whole thing turned me right off. And so the thing I love about solution focus is you can learn it in a few days. That doesn't mean you're any good, but it's a bit like learning chess. Once you've learned the moves in chess, there are no more moves.
Beautiful.
But putting it together in a real situation, that's a kind of lifetime's work, a lifetime of not in trying to invent new moves, but trying to see how each move works and think about what might fit in a certain circumstance. In a way, learning solution focus is not, after a couple of goes, about learning the model. It's about practicing it. It's about using it. It's about talking about it with other people who practice it. It's about sharing experiences. It's about, delving into things that interest you, rather than having this big ladder of professionalism, which is, I love that, but it also it makes it more difficult to sell, to be honest, because people love climbing ladders, and when you say, well, there isn't really a ladder here, you've just got to learn to be good at it.
One of the things I really admired about your work in solutions focus works is that it's a matter of continuing to build communities of practice that support each other in discovering further breakthrough. So before we get any further into this, let's talk about what is the solutions focus, because our listener might not have any real idea of how stupendous this model really is.
Okay, well, Paul Jackson and I wrote The Solutions Focus. There it is. That's the second edition, 2007. The first edition was 2002. So a lot of it's more than 20 years old now. And there is going to be a new edition in next year, I understand. So fingers crossed for that. It's a major rewrite. No, not a page without something changed on it. So it's really going to be worth waiting for. But the basic idea, of course, is the same. Solutions focus is different from problem focus. And in problem focus, the idea is to find out the problem and what's wrong and what's causing what's wrong, and then fix it. And that is the kind of thinking that works very well for if you're trying to fix your automobile or your washing machine or whatever. But it doesn't work very well with people, because automobiles and washing machines don't care what you say to them. But people do. That's the difference. And it's a kind of medical model. The whole medical profession is founded on this idea of finding what's wrong with you, diagnosing it properly, and then giving you the cure that matches that diagnosis, basically. But with things that are, if you like, mental, which are things that are much more to do with the mind and how that connects with your behavior. And it's not a physical illness as such. It's different to that.
If I could also add that when an expert fix isn't really available because we don't have a good problem definition and we don't have a clear solution to it, this is where this work comes in most valuably. It's what Keegan spoke about as a type 3 problem. There are problem types and things like medical syndromes. Or remember when the Lyme's disease was being identified, nobody had any idea what they're seeing. They simply called the first patient insane. They wanted to give her psychiatric treatment, right? And many of these things for which there is no expert fix, the medical model, problem-oriented, absolutely does not work.
It does not work, and it hurts the patient.
Does.
That's the trouble with it. So it's worse than useless in that regard, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing with solutions focus is that we're not interested in what's wrong. What we're interested in is, what do you want? What would your life be like supposing this difficulty, problem, whatever, vanished? Or another way of putting that, more up-to-date way, what are your best hopes from our work together for your own life?
The future perfect. I love.
That's called the platform. That's the topic. And then the future perfect comes in. It's we have 6 tools in the solutions focus. And the platform is, what are we talking about? And what's the benefit of that change? And then the future perfect tool, which is really funky and interesting, is suppose that tonight a miracle happens while you're asleep and the problem is gone, or your best hopes are realized, but you're asleep so you don't notice it. Well, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, what's the first thing you notice that tells you that the miracle happened in the night? And the person usually goes, oh. And that's good because it means that they're thinking. And then eventually they'll say something like, well, I'll be feeling better. And we go, great, you'll be feeling better. What difference will that make to you? And then you start to expand this description of the day after the miracle using some very simple questions. And as I said earlier, there aren't very many questions that we use. There are different ways of doing it, but you can order these questions in different ways. But really, this is not rocket science. It's genuinely not rocket science. It's about encouraging people into a detailed description of their life tomorrow with their hopes realized.
Well, and I should say that if you ask somebody, well, what do you want? The first thing they sort for is everything that they don't want. And they'll give quite a detailed description of everything that they don't want, at which point we have to pause and say, okay, so understood, what do you want? And they'll reiterate everything that they don't want. And it's very important to understand that the definition of the problem state is not identifying an outcome.
No, and this is one thing I've been saying for years and years, is that the problem is not the opposite of the solution. That's what most problem-focused approaches say. If you find the problem, then the solution becomes clear. But with solutions focus, you recognize that the not very good present that we're in is not the same as an ideal present. And in fact, they're nothing to do with each other at all. So investigating the kind of negative aspects of now tells you nothing whatsoever that's useful about the positive aspects. It's a whole new book, it's a whole new story, and therefore we can just jump right to it straight away. And I use the metaphor of, when you go shopping at the supermarket, do you take a list of the things you don't want? No, you do not. Partly because it would be useless, and partly because the supermarket has, if you take it, I don't want apples or sausages or beans today. But the supermarket has 50,000 things. And so you get there and you still have a choice of 49,000 other things to have on your shopping list. You go with the shopping list of what you want. And that guides you much more effectively in the supermarket than the list of things you don't want. And the same is true in solution-focused practice and solution-focused therapy as it's used, and indeed in life, that the list of things you want is just so much more useful than the list of things you don't.
Well, I can also say, and having worked with training people who are coaches, that if they were to walk with another person and dialogue about what the other person wants to achieve, as soon as the client describes a problem area of their life, oftentimes the coach rushes in to provide a fix that they would have applied in their life if they were in that same situation. But that client didn't get to this problem state with someone else's model of trying to fix things. They got there through their own life path. And by the same token, a solution will emerge out of a different level of thinking, not the coach's level of thinking.
Oh, that's right. One of our themes in the book is every case is different. And that means when you're a kind of practitioner and and somebody comes in with a problem, you don't think, oh, that's good. I've seen this problem before. I know what to do with it, which is what doctors think. You have to start again at the beginning. You have to clean your mind, let everything go, and just be very, very interested in the person and in the details of what the person is telling you. And that's a whole other skill. I mean, in a way, that's much more difficult. When people get really good at solution focus, it's not that they get good at asking the questions, because those are easy. They get good at letting all their existing know-how and stuff and expectations go and just focusing on this client as a unique person. And it's the little wrinkles in this person's experience that's going to be the interesting part of this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I really wrapped my brain around Theory U with C. Otto Scharmer. And the book prior to Theory U, which speaks about presencing, being present to the future as it emerges, was a book called Presence that Senge wrote with Otto Scharmer and Betty Sue Flowers and the other person. Anyway, this idea of being able to let go and let come, to be so observant of what is and try to free ourselves from the mental models that may be operating in the moment, to really be present. And I love the way you described it, Mark, is we are much more interested in what shows up between our noses than what shows up between our ears.
Absolutely. And that's another thing. When solution focus, we talk about descriptions of interactional scenes, which are scenes of things you can see. They are things that happen between people. And that's a different thing to getting involved in intrapersonal descriptions of what may or may not be going on in people's heads. And a lot of mentalistic stuff. There's a lot of people talking about that a lot of the time. But our theory is that's useless because you can't see it. You can't work with it. You don't know if it's right or not. So now there's a whole other piece about when people come in with you might call a mental illness or some kind of psychological problem. Why are we talking about behavior? And the reason is, of course, that they are completely and utterly tightly integrated. And you don't need to talk about mental stuff to affect mental stuff. So we love to talk about behavioral stuff that immediately starts affecting mental stuff because it's all the same thing. And people used to talk about the mind-body division, of course. And I think we all know, we're all basically agreed now that there is no mind-body division. Everything affects everything else. And so when people watch in solution focus, they watch us talking about what would you notice? What would your colleague notice tomorrow that would tell them that the miracles happened? Or how would you respond when they noticed that? And these kind of, and what difference would that make to you? What would be the next thing that would happen? And what would be the first tiny sign that things were getting better about this? These are the kind of questions we ask. And people who are steeped in mentalistic stuff think, well, what on earth is that going to do? This is just little tiny behavioral stuff. But actually, it's reorienting the whole person, their mind and their body and their soul and everything else. And that's what we mean by elegance. So you can do all these little small things, but the effect is enormous. And like you, we would say 3 sessions is normal. And if you're not getting anywhere after 3, you should refer the person on to somebody else who will do something, because you do not have a license to waste people's time, and you do not have a license to waste people's money by seeing them once a week for 5 years.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So the other thing that is inherent in solutions focus is this basic principle of brief therapy, which is noticing small concrete indicators of success. It's something that I first heard by Earl Nightingale, way, way back, where he talked about success as the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So if there is any progress whatsoever, you're a success today. And this notion of small concrete indicators is such a blessing to anyone who's on a path to growth and personal development and goal achievement, to keep that in mind and really look for it each day.
Yes, and if you're doing that, then you start noticing it. It's very strange. If these things are small and they're subtle sometimes, but if you know what you're looking for, you begin to see it. And this is a very fundamental principle of human operation. I'm just in the process of changing my car at the moment, and I've been shopping around for different cars. And you have this experience that I'm sure people have had, where you suddenly get interested in, let's say, a Mercedes, certain sort of Mercedes, and all of a sudden the streets are apparently full of this kind of Mercedes, and you think, oh gosh, there's a lot of Mercedes around all of a sudden. And of course, it's not all of a sudden; they were there all the time, but you didn't notice them because you weren't interested in them. And this, again, is a very fundamental thing, but it's surprisingly influential. And this way that we help people to start to be aware of what they might be able to notice. Of course, they have to notice it. I can't notice it for them, but we can lay the ground, and we can sort of have a conversation which prepares them to notice things. And one of the other things we do, just to complete the picture a bit, is to look for what's already working.
And this is such a game changer. I mean, it's if you think about the ideal end result being a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 is you haven't even begun thinking about it yet. Where are you today? Pick a number, whatever that is. And if a person would pick, let's say, a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, the common response by most people would be, only a 3? Why so low? But a very simple change in the way that you ask it, why so high and not lower? Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So there's a curious thing, and it's a very simple tool, this idea of a scale from 1 to 10. And it's very familiar to us. And 10 is the good thing, and 1 is nowhere at all. And then you ask people where on the scale, and every time they will choose a number. And very rarely will it be 1. There's occasionally, and there are things you can do, but mostly it's like 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. I have sometimes. But the number doesn't matter, because the next question is you've put a flag in the sand here. And now you've got the choice, as you say, Paul. You can either look at what's missing, or you can look at what's there already. And we always go with what's there already to start with. So how come you're a 3 and not lower? What's helping you get up to a 3 right now? And it's always right now. Let's pin it down. And they start and they go, oh, well, there's this, okay, and there's that, and then there's a pause, and then there's the other thing, okay, carry on, and and then there's that fourth thing, and the fifth thing, and then there's the sixth thing, and all of a sudden these things, and were these things there already? I don't know, but they come into the conversation in an interesting way. Particularly if the person who's talking to them is sitting there looking expectant and interested and kind of nodding and maybe writing it down and looking excited and going, carry on. What difference does that make to you? Yeah, okay. What helps that to happen? How do you do that?
And what's so gorgeous about this, Mark, and it's such a stunner, that it becomes something of a meme after that for other people. Like, oh, I only scored 10 points in that game. 10? Why so many and not fewer? But the idea is what you're immediately doing is sorting for resourcefulness, access to resource that's already present. Whereas when the person started the conversation, they were coming in with this paucity of resources, believing that there was no hope to even get where they want to go. So in just that brief moment of changing that question from why so low to why so high and not lower, it's stunning what an effect that has on the brain's ability to sort for the power and potential that's within oneself.
And then you have the secret weapon solution focused question. It must be deployed at this point. What else? So, there's this thing that's helping me. Okay, great. What else? And one of my colleagues, Chris Iveson in London, says that solution-focused practice is about asking what else until you can't bear to ask it again. And then asking it again.
One more time.
Because the idea is that this thing is more than cumulative. People think there's no things that are working. And then they find one thing, and they find 2 and 3 and 6 and 10 and 20. And the whole world changes. The whole world changes around them.
It does, because it becomes plentiful and abundant almost immediately. And I remember way back when I first got into these concepts as a clinical hypnotherapist trained by Zula Bowers. I love that name, Zula. Anyway, she said, now, Paul, if you want to see something quite interesting, ask a person what else and what else, and see how the conversation keeps going, and then put in, is there anything else? And they'll immediately be the word no.
No. Yes, and this is such an important point.
What is it about the human mind that causes that to occur?
Well, it's curious because language is so influential on us, isn't it? And we don't think about it often unless we're trained in hypnotherapy or whatever. But the difference between what else and is there anything else is just colossal. And the what else, of course, has a presupposition in it. There is something else. All you have to do is think about it and find it. Whereas is there anything else is a yes-no question and invites you strongly to the easy answer, which is no, I can't, no, I can't, no, I can't be bothered to think about it. No. And all the solutions-focused questions are highly presupposition, absolutely presupposition. And indeed, Steve DeShazer, who was the kind of great grandfather of solution-focused work and a mentor to me, he was a fan of Milton Erickson. And you will know Milton Erickson, who, of course, whose work was used in the development of NLP as well. Mm-hmm. He was fantastic at noticing little things about this particular client that could be used and utilized. And that spirit went through Steve DeShazer's work and into solution-focused practice and through me. But if you learn the presuppositional questions, you don't need all the fancy background. You just need to know that what else is a good question and is there anything else is not.
That's great.
As long as you are talking about something that connects with what the person wants or what's working. But if you are on the process of what's wrong, oh, this thing's wrong, and what else? And what else? And what else? Before you, in 5 minutes, your client will be suicidal and trying to kill you, and with good reason, I would say. So the what else thing only applies when we're on these tracks that solution focus inhabits so much about what do you want, what's already working. Then what else is great? If we're still on what's wrong, what else is completely.
And now the next magic question that you always ask once you've got a number as high as it is and not lower is, and what would one step up that scale look like, which then gets someone to orient toward possible futures.
Yes, that's right. So there's a good little riff here, which is, it's curious that you do what would be a tiny sign of progress that would tell you 1 point up the scale. What else?
Nice.
And then you say, well, now what small things might you do in the next few days to kind of move in that direction? And the logical way would be to decide the steps and then think about the signs that they might create. But we do it always the other way around. So you think about the signs that would constitute some progress, and then you think, well, what small steps can we take now? Very small in the next couple of days that will start to move, to help us to move. We're building on what's working and helping us to move in that direction. And it's such a great way around to do it. It's a bit curious, but people should try it. And maybe we're going to talk about the user's guide to the future in a minute, because this is a really key piece of that little framework that is part of one of my books.
You sent me the first article that you wrote about the user's guide to the future. It was ding, 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 ding. Absolutely. This is it. We're stepping up to the threshold of possibility. There's an immense abyss in front of us. We don't know really how we're going to get to the other side, but there are some things that we do know. We know very clearly the first few steps we could take, and we know some of the precursors to that end result that we want to get to. So if you would talk a bit about this is really an essential piece or addition, I think, to the work. And it really came from someone who had been using solutions focus for quite a while.
Not all the elements of the future are as useful as the others. And people tend to treat the future as a thing that's well defined in front of you, and then it gets fainter and fainter and fainter as it recedes, until in the distance you can't see anything. That's a mistake. So here is my way of thinking. I call it the user's guide to the future. If you imagine we start now, and there are 5 zones out into the future. And we start in the very distant future, the horizon, I call it, which is where the thing you are wanting, the thing you are hoping for, your goal, your aspiration will be realized. So you write down the thing, the goal, the hope, whatever it is, the thing we're moving towards. And then just before the horizon, there are the bits I call the building blocks, the precursors. So what needs to be in place for this horizon thing to happen? Because again, this is way off in the future. We don't have any of these things yet, probably, but we know what we need to make the final thing happen. And the next zone is called Ant Country. And I wrote a piece about Ant Country just last week on my Substack, which is called Steps to Humanity of Organization. And Ant Country is the thing not to focus on. Ant Country is the bit where it's too complex to model. It's just too uncertain. There's no point making detailed plans for the middle future because they ain't going to happen. They never do. And actually, if you reflect for a moment on all of our experiences of life, we make these plans and then they get thrown off course because unexpected things happen and for all sorts of good reasons. So the secret is not to worry about the middle future.
Add that our colleague Jack Canfield described it quite well. If you want to drive across the United States at night, you only need to be able to see to the end of your headlight. You don't need to know every square foot of the road from here to the other end.
And you can't,
right.
Indeed. And there will be uncertainties and unexpectedness, and you'll have to detour and all of that thing. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you will have to adjust. You'll have to adjust based on what's happening at the time. But it's too far away for us to be able to plan all that now. So now we come back and closer to the future, and we have the zone of the near future, which is what would be the tiny signs of progress. What would you notice that were telling you were moving in the right direction? And then the very near future, which is your next small steps. Little things you can do in the matter of days or maybe a week or two at most to kind of move there. And the idea is that you work right to left on the page. From the future back, what's the future? The horizon, just before the horizon, Ant Country, let's avoid it. Tiny signs of progress, next steps. And you can get into action on the biggest, hairiest of goals and hopes. You can get into immediate action in a matter of minutes with this. And I've used this with very senior executives who feel completely stressed out because they have so many things going on, they have no clue what to do next. And we go through the user's guide for each of their projects. And at the end of a conversation, they've now not only got a good handle on what the projects are, but actually they have a small next step on each of them, which they can go and do. And they go, oh, goodness me, I feel better.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden you have some control and some agency over this amazing, whirling, confusing present and future that's surround us all.
Well, there's also a very important aspect of the human mind that when we stand at the edge of Ant Country, or what I refer to as the abyss, the void, where we really don't know what happens after this, mind is designed to reach into our history, pull out all of the failures, all the mistakes, all the possibilities for disaster they can, and then just lob it into that abyss so that as we look into the abyss, we see everything we fear most. And very often it's what causes that hesitation. So the way in which User's Guide works, it's always providing a sense of the known, and it's allowing us to access more and more of our own resourcefulness rather than the lack and limitation of the past. Also very important is when a client comes to us, Mark, and says, I've got a problem. For me, that's a time to applaud, because what they're doing is they're identifying the place. They're giving away their power out of some mythical fear or erroneous conclusion, some childhood wound or whatever it might be. So it's not a bad thing that someone generates a problem. It
No,
just
not
gives
at
us
all.
the opportunity. Now we can focus.
In fact, the worst kind of people are the ones who tend to say they haven't got any problems, but are completely ineffective. A problem's a great starting place. Solution focus, we go quickly to what do you want? What do you hope for?
So tell me a little bit about the insight that you gained when you got this idea of the user's guide to the future, because that then led to the new edition of the book that's coming out. What do you think really was revealed to you in that?
So solution focused work has been evolving over the last 20 years. And I realized in about 2017 that in a way, there were some people doing it as if it was now. There were other people doing it as if it was 1988. And these were now almost two different practices. The old practice was actually still, surprisingly for solution focused work, still rather problem focused. It's about how would you know if your problem went away, and when does your problem not happen? Now, those are both good questions. But if you start focusing it rather than what's the problem, then what do you hope for? Then it's what would your hopes look like if they all materialized at once? And what instances are there of your hopes happening anyway?
That is so gorgeous because it's solutions focus applied to solutions focus. So there's this lovely recursivity that now reveals perhaps an error in the model itself. It's not really an error, but it's an opportunity to recognize where we could produce an error.
Absolutely. And the thing is that the research that there is shows that the sort of the new way, I wrote a paper called SF 2.0. Then I called it the next generation of solution focused practice. And I had a new book out 2 years ago called the next generation of solution focused practice.
Yeah.
And the new edition of the solutions focus will have a lot of that stuff in it as well. But that is all about, it's just about getting descriptions. It's all about the detail. It's all about your hopes. And it's all about this little interactional details. And that's kind of it.
Cool. So ask you, as we're getting to a point of wrapping up, was there a discovery that you made about humanity going through a global pandemic?
The thing I noticed in the global pandemic is that the importance of local community.
Yes.
The importance of neighborhood level community. And I spent my life to that point being very fortunate in that I was on and off airplanes and I had friends all over the world. And I suddenly realized that even though I had friends all over the world, Jenny and my wife and I, we had no friends in our street because we hardly spent any time there. And of course, when the lockdown came here, the pandemic lockdown, all of a sudden you start noticing it's actually the people next door, the people along the road who are your most important potential connections. And for all the wonders of Zoom and everything else, which is amazing, actually there's something about being rooted in a place. And so I got interested in how do you create effective neighborhood communities, and solution focus is a fantastic piece of that. And the host leadership, leading as a host, not a hero or a servant, is another. The host being the ones who gathers people together. That's a fantastic thing to do in community development.
I remember you going out onto the stoop in front of your home and playing saxophone to the neighborhood.
That's right. I did that every Sunday for several months in the beginning of the pandemic. And people came out and, because we couldn't go near each other with the rules that were here at the time, but you could stand in the street and people were nice enough to come out and applaud, and, we'd all wave to each other. And felt really important. And we've made a lot of progress since then in my little bit of Edinburgh, Scotland, which is my background that you can see, called the West End of Edinburgh. We had almost no neighborhood community stuff at all. Wow. But I and a few others have done some things, and we have a Facebook group which used to have 20 people in it and now has 3,500 who all live in this neighborhood. We have had a festival of the West End last year, by the people, for the people. We keep moving along, and I feel so much more rooted in this place here now, and I feel better for that, honestly. I love our international connections, and I love that I was fortunate enough to work all over the world. And it's so good to be able to say hi to your neighbors and know who's who and where's where and what's what, and build connections locally as well. So that's been a thing that I've learned over the last 3 years.
Beautiful. And there's plenty of research that indicates that the most important thing you could do if the grid ever did go down, survivalists don't really stand a chance as much as someone who's able to build community and share resources. My wife and I have gone out to an event of the world's largest Leave No Trace event in the Nevada desert called the Burning Man. And this year, as I'm recording this right now with you, this year we had the mud apocalypse where the rains came about 4 or 5 days into the event and nobody could move. No vehicles could move, so no services were available. And it's radical self-reliance anyway.
This was such a story that it made the British news.
Yes, it was international lens on the ridiculous, awful stuff that a few thousand people experienced out of 70,000+. But the idea of it was shelter in place, share resources. And we learned that from the pandemic. So when I encountered people that were freaking out, I simply said, well, remember the lessons from the pandemic, shelter in place. Don't plan to go anywhere. Get to know your neighbors. And we had gatherings under our shade structure, sharing heat and sharing food and sharing stories and song and all kinds of things. And I agree with you, Mark, as the world does become smaller and the limit of resources becomes tighter, it's more and more important for us to recognize that we're all sharing this spaceship Earth, as Buckminster Fuller called it. And as could you say is the way forward for our human family? What would your encouragement be to our listener?
I would say, think about local and global together. That's not a new thought. But you can think about local in terms of how do you connect? How do you help people? How can you get people to help you? And then you can think about global in terms of how does your example help to encourage other people? I'm a big fan of the ripple effect. Something small or moderate happens in one place, but then it starts to ripple out and other people start to take notice and other things happening and other people start to get inspired or take inspiration and do something that's maybe a bit related or connected in some way. And look out for the ripples. The ripples are there and growing at the moment. But being solution focused, you want ripples that are useful. There are also some ripples that are not useful and they're very distracting and they're very annoying. And, a lot of people, including myself, spend too much time worrying about them and cursing at them and all the rest of it. But look for the ripples of usefulness and aim to create a few ripples and then look for a few ripples. Because if you're doing both of those, you are maxing out our chances, I think. If you're just creating and not looking, well, it's going to be working very hard. If you're just looking and not creating, well, maybe you could. There are ways you can learn by trying to do things in your own place. And so I would say that, and we must keep going. That's the other thing. Solution focus is all about small steps, and the way through any abyss, morass, whatever, is small steps. You keep putting one foot in front of the other. As the explorer Ranulph Fiennes once said, that is the way that you walk across a continent, is you keep putting one step in front of the other and keep going. And I love that solution focus is a fantastic way to keep going. But the going is important. Just sitting around hoping for something to get better is not apart from very temporarily, a satisfactory answer. I think you've got to keep going.
Take action.
So one step from the other. Take action, but take small action, take focused action, take action that you can see the results of, and the action that is focused on usefulness and progress.
Beautiful.
I think if we can do that, then maybe we can do something.
Absolutely, we can do something. I'm thinking of a new acronym, ROUX, Ripples of Usefulness Expressed. So we're all going to be at our stoves making the next roux for our meal.
Roux, yes. That thickens things up in a nice way, usually, a roux. Yes, very good.
Mark McKergow, thanks so much for being with me. What a great gift you are to the world. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Paul. Nice to be with you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mark McKergow. You can learn more about Mark at markmckergow.substack.com. That's markmckergow.substack.com. That's a complicated one, but you'll also find it in the show notes. And now, in the second part of the podcast, it's just you and me. I'll tell you how to use the Paraliminal sessions in the MINDTRX app to easily handle obstacles and move toward the success you want, especially as it relates to our discussion with Mark. If you're new to the relaxing Paraliminal audio sessions, they use breakthrough technologies to activate your whole mind in only 20 minutes to help improve any area of your life. Let's get going. Welcome to the follow-up to my conversation with Mark McKergow, where we talked about the solutions focus and the user's guide to the future. So in thinking about the conversation I just had with Mark, I've identified 4 potential ways in which you could think about bringing paraliminal listening sessions into making progress today. So the 4 areas are orienting to the future you desire, recognizing resources that are available to you right now. Third is taking tiny next steps. And the fourth is sorting for evidence of success and resources that are within us and available to us wherever we might be. So if we think about these 4 areas and look at the potential paraliminal recordings you could play with, starting with this idea of orienting to the future that you desire. Now, Mark and I talked about how difficult it is for many people to think other than, this is a problem I have, I need to get rid of it. But to be able to expressly state what it is you're choosing and what would it look, sound, and feel like if you were living it? What are the descriptions? And as he said, and what else? And what else? And in what other ways would your life be different? So that we could sort for the distinctions that you could notice every single day on the way to your success. So 2 paraliminals that may be very helpful to you. The first I identified is called wealth motivation. So think about wealth, not just in terms of financial abundance, but well-being, because the root of the word wealth and well-being is shared in the Old English language. So what wealth or what abundance, what resourcefulness are you looking for that you're motivated to build, create, or recognize or receive in your life right now? Wealth motivation, great way to get your thinking oriented toward the future you want to create. Second paraliminal that I would recommend here is called power thinking. And power thinking is a way of making sure that the thing that we need to do in the small next steps in front of us are those things that are in our consciousness right now. How are you going to wake up today and see the result of creating the life that you want? In Mark's work, we didn't use the phrase, but it's called the miracle question in brief therapy. Imagine tonight you go to sleep and the change occurs, but you're asleep, so you don't know that it happened. What would be the first evidence that the miracle occurred? And so as you begin thinking about these as evidence, how are you going to focus your thinking, your actions today to have that come about? The second area that I'm thinking about is recognizing resources that are available to you right now. Now, the basis of paraliminal technology is the recognition that we are tremendously resourced. The problem that many of us have is that we think in terms of lack or limitation. We have faulty conclusions about who we are, mythical fears about what might happen. And as a result, we live much smaller and we push our resourcefulness to the side. We marginalize how powerful and resourceful we actually are. So in the thinking that Mark and I were discussing, it's that recognition, not why so low, but why so high and not lower? Remember, it was this idea that on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place yourself today? Whatever number you pick is fine. And then we ask, why did you choose a number that high and not lower? And you start to sort for resourcefulness, resources that actually are in play right now, that if you did more of that or access more of that, you would make progress that you want. Very different than only a 3, why so low and not higher, which causes you to sort for lack, limitation, scarcity, blocks, barriers, everything that would stand in the way of you getting what you really want. So this idea of using paraliminal technology to help you with this, the number one, and you've heard me use this over and over again in the MINDTRX podcast, the prosperity paraliminal, because it helps you sort for the truth that you are abundantly resourced. The universe is abundantly resourced, and your prosperity consciousness gives you access to those resources. Connect with them, translate those into your actions in this day, and you will be creating your world as you want it to be. The second paraliminal that really helps us recognize our resourcefulness is called personal genius. Whenever you're going to learn anything new, that you're going to develop new skills, you're going to gain new knowledge, you want to be able to accomplish new things, personal genius is a great starting point because it recognizes those beyond genius resources that are already within you that you have access to when you connect with the vastness of your non-conscious mind, your inner mind. It's connected to infinite intelligence, high wisdom, and use that as your access to resourcefulness is a matter of having a conversation with your inner mind on an ongoing basis. Personal genius, a great place to do that. The next area is about taking tiny next steps. So the idea is wherever you are right now, what would one step up the scale look, sound, and feel like? What is some small action you could take in the next 24 hours, in the next couple of days, in the next week? And if you could think of a small step, think of an even smaller step still, that will be very beneficial to you in recognizing there's no need to hesitate. There's no need to doubt. This small step is definitely something that you can take. And the paraliminal that can help really in a powerful way with this is called the new action generator. So long as you could conceive of a next step you could take, new action generator will really help you put that into play and make progress right away. The fourth area I mentioned is this idea of sorting for evidence of resourcefulness and success. So evidence is, we talked about it in our conversation as small concrete indicators that show you are making progress. Now, this is so critical to people's ongoing realization of a long arc toward their goal, because sometimes our goals are high and they're hard to get to. And making small, tiny next steps and noticing, oh, that worked. I've made some progress today. That's really helpful. Do more of what works, and anything that isn't working, do something different. So the paraliminals that I think could really help with this, number one, finding treasure. because that paraliminal orients the mind and its amazing goal-seeking capability to identify, as Mark said, seeing Mercedes all over the place when he wants to buy a Mercedes, right? It's that your brain actually begins to sort for and notice all of these treasures, all of this resource, all of these possibilities, all these opportunities that you're calling to yourself that are showing up for you, but you might not have noticed it because you weren't asking the question, how can I take one small next step in the direction of my goal today? So finding treasure, super. It gets your mind really orienting toward that, like Sherlock Holmes, discovering the ways in which everything fits together to show you that you can do it. The second paraliminal is one I did with Stuart Emery called Success Built to Last. Now, not only are you going to be establishing where it is you want to go, but it's also going to be reinforcing this idea that whatever you want to do, whoever you want to be in the world, be really good at it. And it's perfectly okay to start out being really bad at it. Because, hey, in some cases, you're a beginner. You've never done this before. And on the long arc toward that massively transformative goal that you're going to be living into today and over the next rest of your life, really, you've got to take the first few steps. And not everything works out the way you might have imagined it. It's what Mark was referring to as ants country. Now, ants you could think of as automatic negative thoughts, but in his metaphor, it's how ants actually build communities and build the structures that they live in. What happens, they don't have eyesight. There's just a lot of interactions that happen. Very chaotic, very unpredictable. And very often when we're building a success that we've never experienced before, we're going to encounter some unexpected challenges. We're going to be taking some actions that we hadn't really anticipated we were going to take. And we'll be encountering some people we never really thought would be helpers along the way. And so the notion of success built to last is it really keeps us in the hunt for the opportunities that we can then strengthen our beliefs, recognize the possibility of our success, and keep on keeping on as we realize our desired future. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I have. Keep it going. Discover those small next steps that you can take today to realize what truly matters to you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the Paraliminal audio sessions in the MINDTRX app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is, your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and to propel you toward the success you want. Go to www.mindtrx.com/go. That's www.mindtrx.com/go. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your world today. Be sure to be back for more episodes of the MINDTRX podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. Thank you again for being here on our MINDTRX podcast.